How's it going? Thad Brown here with you on the Endgame, Monday, April the 27th, 2 days after the NFL draft is in the books. We're going to talk all about all the picks for the Bills. Yes, Davidson Igbinosun, the corner. I know how to pronounce his name. I still don't understand necessarily why Brandon Beane thought it was a good idea. We will get into that. Plus the trade downs or the trades down, all that stuff too. And talk a little Sabres, who are up 3-1 over the Bruins. It is good times for at least Western New York NHL hockey fans. The Amerks, of course, got knocked out yesterday by Toronto, a 4-2 loss in Game 3, so lost at best of 3, 2-1. Last call ever for Don Stevens as the voice of the Amerks after 40 years. Definitely want to take a minute here just to talk about Don real quick as one of the guys who has been the example, the staple of Rochester hockey for 4 decades, a guy that I grew up watching and listening to when I was a kid, someone I listened to a lot over the years working in the business here, covering high school basketball games, going from game to game, what's going on with the Amerks. You always tune into Don. And he's been so humbled these past few months, talking about the retirement, about his career, about all that he's accomplished, the number of games that he's covered, called, the different stories he has. It's been a really amazing career that will be appreciated widely here in Rochester and Buffalo, more in Rochester, obviously, but not nearly enough nationwide for all that he's accomplished. I mean, this is a tough business to stick in. Just because he's been the voice for 40 years doesn't mean that he hasn't been earning that over and over. You got to have a certain level, not only of broadcast quality, but certainly an ability to connect that keeps you at an organization for as long as Don has been with the Amerks. So it will be different next year without the voice of Don Stevens narrating Amerks games. I hope he enjoys his retirement. He has certainly earned it by a lot. He probably earned it about 10 years ago. He's going to finally enjoy it now. But it will be different. And his last call was over the weekend up in Toronto for the last Amerks game of the year. Amerks season, by the way, just real disappointing. Wasn't the kind of year that I think anybody thought they would have, in part because the Sabres have been so amazing. But a rough year for the Amerks, still a memorable one because it is the end for Don Stevens and the last time we will get to hear him call a hockey game in Rochester. All right, let's move on to the Bills now. And we will start with that round 2 pick, Davidson Igbinosun. I was as surprised as anybody else. Didn't seem to make a lot of sense. And I know Brandon Beane has explained it. And there are a number of things that Brandon Beane talked about that make sense when it comes to Igbinosun. Number one was the idea that the Bills need 3 corners. I know that when you think of drafting a corner, when the Bills already have Max Hairston and Christian Benford, the idea is this guy's going to be a backup. And he probably will be. He probably will be. Maybe not, but and we'll talk about that in a minute. But even if he is a backup, he's going to play. The last 5 seasons, and I didn't even bother to go past that, so it might be more than that. I just wanted to see general recent history. How often does the third cornerback get onto the field? And over the last 5 years, the third corner for the Bills has played 300 snaps. At least, some guys more. Now, there's circumstances there for sure. We had a couple years where there was a rotation, whether it be the Kyer Elam, Christian Benford year, or last year with Max Hairston and Trey White. Obviously, injuries have been a part of it. You know, Trey White gets hurt 5 games into a season, so you end up playing the third corner the whole year, more or less. But regardless, recent history will tell you that the third corner is a guy who's going to see the field. So you better be comfortable with that guy getting on the field. So from that point of view, I do understand what Brandon Beane is saying. The other thing that I agree with Brandon Beane on, and this one I think also was one I think that people didn't quite understand. Brandon Beane said he thought corner was one of the biggest needs on this team. And I think he's right about that. And I know it may not feel that way because the Bills are starting this draft process with Max Harrison and Christian Benford already. But especially with Dorian Strong being a huge question mark due to the neck injury, they don't have anything after those top two guys. And really, Max Harrison is yet to prove that he is a dependable starter in the NFL. So when you look at needs on this team, yeah, we thought safety was a need. Well, the Bills have Cole Bishop and C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Geno Stone. We thought defensive line was a need. Well, geez, last year they put 3 top 4 round draft picks into the D-line. Their number one free agent spend this year, Bradley Chubb, defensive lineman. Another sizable free agent spend last year, Michael Hoyt. 2 years ago, Dwayne Carter, 3rd round pick. There have been assets expended on the D-line. And yeah, I still think they could get better in terms of a run defender in the middle. But that's a kind of a small, niche-y need when you're looking at the defensive line as a whole. On the offense, there isn't a guard, at least officially, but we think Alec Anderson can handle the job. And if not, Austin Corbett is there and Lloyd Cushenberry is a backup center. There's depth there. You're fine at tight end. You're fine at running back. Pretty sure the quarterback will be okay. You really start going down through the needs, and corner rises towards the top of the list pretty quickly. I don't think it's a bigger need over linebacker. I still and we're going to talk about Caleb Alarms-Orr later, but I linebacker to me is still probably the number one need on this team. But after that, I would go corner. So when Brandon Beane says that corner is one of the biggest needs in the team, I would agree. So from those 2 points of view, you are finding a player that will get on the field, and you are addressing position that is a priority need for your team, a higher priority at least. But after that, I don't see a lot of the sense here. Number one, Brandon Beane said, the last couple years we've had guys who are bullseyes, guys who good offenses and good quarterbacks will target and take advantage of. Well, that's nice, but a low second round draft pick does not solve that problem. It might address the problem, but it doesn't solve the problem. You know why? Because rookies, until they prove themselves in the NFL, they are the bullseyes. So if your concern was, as a GM, that we don't want to have bullseyes in case we have injuries, a second round rookie at pick 62 is a bullseye until he plays and proves himself to not be a bullseye. So yeah, you can throw a pick at it, but it's only not a bullseye if the guy can play. And for him to play, now look, I said he's going to get some time, right? He's not going to get regular time. And maybe this is a year where the corners are healthy. We'll see. But it's not like Igbinosun is going to get 17 weeks in every game, snaps over and over, to where we get to the postseason and the Bills will feel good about putting him on the field. It's also not like Igbinosun, I should say, is such a good player that he's going to walk into the NFL and there will be teams that will not only be confident with him on their team, confident to use him, but there will be teams who understand that going at him is a risk. Mansour Delane, the first corner taken by the Chiefs, he will walk into the league maybe not being a bullseye, certainly less of a bullseye than the guy taken at pick 62. So if the short-term need for the Bills is we want to make sure that we have a third corner who can play, you haven't solved that. Maybe he'll get there. But pick 62 is not a guy, as Cole Bishop proved last year. Cole Bishop might be on his way to becoming an all-pro. He was picked at number 60. I know an injury was part of it, but he was not good at all year one. So if your short-term goal is to reduce the number of bullseyes you have on your team, you are not solving that at pick 62. And then the long-term goal, I don't see it at all. Essentially, for Igbinosun to be a success beyond just the initial impact, for him to have a real long-term connection to this team, long-term role on this team, the only way that seems to happen is if Max Harrison busts. If your number one pick from last year is any good, then Igbinosun is a backup. Now, again, a backup is going to play 300 snaps, but 300 snaps is still probably the 30th most snaps on the team. So if you want to say, well, look, we still have this pick, even if Hairston's good, then this guy will be the guy who plays the 300 snaps. That's great. But you've got 30 other guys in the team who are going to be more valuable to your team. And I know you don't need, you have a lot of those 30 positions filled, but not all of them. So why burn that low second round pick on a guy whose best case long-term scenario is to be your number 3 corner? And the reason I land on that is one of the other things, and we talked about it a little bit here. Brandon Beane said one of the problems the Bills had in that Broncos game was the fact that they had corners who got targeted when they got into the game, or defensive backs, we'll say. Dane Jackson was one on the late touchdown. Darnell Savage on the end of the first half touchdown. Savage was a safety, not quite the same thing, but the point still stands. Brandon Beane has also had a philosophy that the way you lose in the playoffs reveals what your weaknesses are. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I think the further along you go in the postseason, the more other teams can expose where you have a problem. And when you look at what happens to the Bills in these games where they lose in the playoffs, I know this year Josh Allen had 4 turnovers, which was a big part of it. But obviously the defense, people say they gave up 33 points. It really was 27 because the offense donated 2 field goals. Regardless, at the end of the game, the Bills had a lead and gave it up for a number of reasons. But one of the big ones is that Dane Jackson came onto the field. It's like the 4th corner, 5th corner, however many the Bills had gone through that year, and then couldn't make a play. So the Bills are trying to avoid that. They are trying to say, we are not going to be the team that when we get to the postseason is going to have a defensive back out there that is such a weakness that the moment he walks onto the field, he's going to be exploited. And they did it in the draft, obviously, with Igbinosun here, and they did it in free agency, adding C.J. Gardner-Johnson along with Geno Stone at safety, and DeMar Hamlin, for that matter, and Jalen Kilgore, which we might talk about a little later. And while that makes a lot of sense, the problem is we may hear all the time, or we hear a lot from Brandon Beane, that how you lose in the postseason reveals a lot about the weaknesses on your team. Another thing we hear a lot from Brandon Beane and virtually anybody who is in the NFL is that every year is a new year. So that means every year you're going to have new problems. New strengths too, but new problems. So if you go into a season tunnel vision into, I'm going to just plug the hole that was a problem last year, you're never really going to get ahead. It's kind of like the cartoon character, whether it's Wile E. Coyote or Scooby-Doo or whatever one you want to put in, who's trying to plug the holes in the dam. You know how it works in the cartoons, right? The dam will be leaking, there's water coming out of all these little spots, and whoever's trying to make you laugh and stop up the leaks will put one hole in a leak, and then another one starts spewing out water. And then you put a finger to stop that leak, and then another leak comes out. This is what the Bills are doing if your philosophy is, we're going to fix what our problem was last year. And the Bills have done this a number of times. You know, Von Miller, that signing was after a lack of pass rush. When the Bills went to Houston and it's Duke Williams as your primary outside receiver, Stephon Diggs was traded for not long after. I think there's more that had to do with the Diggs trade than just how they had lost the year before. But regardless, Brandon Beane has done a number of times what he's doing now, seemingly, which is look at what happened last year and say, I got to fix that. But the salary cap will not allow you to fix everything. So like Wile E. Coyote or Bugs Bunny or Scooby-Doo or whatever, again, silly Looney Tunes character you want to think of, every time Brandon Beane puts his hole in one of the leaks in his dam, another one is going to sprout. That's just the way it goes in the NFL. You're not going to be able to solve all your problems. And if you're always chasing the one that happened last year, you're never going to be able to anticipate the one that happens this year. And maybe you can, but you're not going to solve all of them. Even if you fix last year's leak, there's just going to be another one. It happens all the time in this league. What the Bills are missing with this perspective is it feels like they're never getting ahead of the problem. They're always trying to react. They're always trying to, let's make sure we're good everywhere. What's the biggest problem the Bills have had in the postseason? Because it's not always having weaknesses at your depth corners. It's not always a lack of receiving help. It is kind of always a lack of pass rush, but a different discussion. The thing the Bills don't have in the postseason consistently, the reason the Bills get knocked out of the playoffs most consistently, or the most consistent reason, is that they never have that other elite player outside of Josh Allen. The Bills never have their Chris Jones. They never have their Jackson Smith and Jigba. They never have their Philadelphia defensive line. It's always Josh Allen and a bunch of good, but not great, not elite players. And like we talked about leading up to the draft, the best way to land one of those guys is in the draft. Because the way the salary cap is, players who are like that are not going to get free in free agency. Yeah, you can trade for them, but it's very often going to cost, i.e., 2 first-round picks for Max Crosby, a price that teams will not always want to pay. And a price that really can be risky, a la the Colts last year, trading 2 first-round picks for Sauce Gardner and having that immediately explode in their face. The best way to land the type of impact player the Bills have been missing is in the draft. And yeah, most of the time you want to do that in the first 25 to 30 picks, but you can do it in round 2. And in this case, it feels like Brandon Beane lit a pick on fire in order to solve last year's problem. A pick that in theory could have turned it into an elite impact player. A pick like what Cole Bishop has become 2 years after he was selected about the same spot. And that to me is the biggest problem I have with this spot, this draft. Because while Brandon Beane has addressed the problem from last year, there will be a new problem this year that no one can anticipate. And what he has not done, at least with this one pick, is give the Bills another chance to have a player become a big-time impact player. Now, it is at a position of high leverage. Corner is one of those more important positions. So at least that is something that is useful in the right area. We're attacking the right position. But what you've done is you've taken 2 draft picks at that high leverage position, Max Hairston and Davison Igbinosun, and you've put the Bills in a situation where only one can hit. At best. We don't even know if either one is going to be that great level of player. And look, maybe if you want to argue that let's take 2 shots at it, and that gives the Bills a better chance to find a guy who could be good in the high leverage spot, I can live with that argument. But I do think that chasing last year's problem is not how you find next year's impact player. Fixing last year's losses, which you really can never do, right? That loss is gone and ain't coming back. That team is in the past. We hear all the time, coaches, general managers, quarterbacks, they never talk about last year because last year's team is different. It's not the same team. So why are we spending so much time trying to fix last year's problems? I know. It's the same roster. You want to address that stuff. I get it. But if the solution is going to be, if the way this team is going to get over the top is by trying to always address what happened last year, then you are losing the opportunity to create a team that can win this year, or you're making it harder for yourself. And again, you can say whatever you want about what Igbinosun might be, how he fits. The thing the Bills, or even, the need for better depth at corner, the thing the Bills have not had in this postseason run, in this 7-year run, is that guy in January who can make a difference at the same level of Josh Allen. And by adding Davison Igbinosun, maybe you're covering yourself up. You're giving yourself 2 chances at corner. I could see that. But you're also taking one of your last two high leverage, high draft assets and flushing them. Because neither one of those two guys, at minimum, cannot work out and become a long-term impact player. That doesn't mean that it can't work. At the end of the day, we can sit here and argue about draft position and consensus boards and, reaches and steals and all that stuff. At the end of the day, if the guy can play, then the GM is right. And if Davison Igbinosun is such a good player that he is not necessarily even becoming a Christian Benford level player, but if he's just a really good number two, then no one will mind because the pick will have worked. All these arguments about draft grades and how someone used the board, how somebody maneuvered up and down, it doesn't matter if the guy can play. So we'll find out soon if Davison Igbinosun can play. The other thing about the pick, too, is that he's not such a great player that I would just go over, that I would be happy putting my roster in a position where last year's first-round pick might not be useful anymore. He's a solid player. I mean, Igbinosun's a good physical corner, does a nice job taking away back shoulders. But as a taller, longer, more physical guy usually is, he's also the kind of guy that's a little stiff in the hips, probably have a little bit of trouble with faster, shiftier receivers. That's just generally how those guys. If you get someone who's 6'2", like Igbinosun is, and can be physical, and then also has the quicks to hang with shifty receivers, well, then that guy is Pat Surtain. That guy's Sauce Gardner. He's going to go second, third, fourth overall. So if you're getting a guy who's down in the bottom of round 2 with the kind of physical attributes in terms of being a press man corner, having size, all that stuff, then he's probably going to be weak when it comes to the quick stuff. And that's generally the book on Igbinosun. The other thing this pick kind of jumpstarts in me, and this has been talked about a little bit, is what does it mean for Max Hairston now? Because Hairston, obviously, like we said, was the number one or the first round pick for the Bills last year. And injuries were 100% a part of what hampered his season last year. Not something that anyone should really, like last year was almost a redshirt year. It was a little discouraging from the point of view that Trey White was just the better corner. I think some of that is Trey White's familiarity with the defense. But regardless, you spent a first-round pick on a guy. Yes, he got hurt. Yes, he got way behind. But when he came back, never really was a legit threat to take the starting job. And now, in a new defense, I think I've had a concern about whether or not Max Hairston would be a fit for this defense. Because his game was speed and closing ability. His number one highlight of the year, short of the interceptions, in camp, the first play where you looked at it and said, wow, this might work, was a play where he looked like he had put himself in the wrong spot. He had been a little bit out of position in his zone defense in camp. And yet, when he saw, I don't remember who it was, Elijah Moore, somebody at the back of the end zone, he closed like a water bug and took a pass away. That's his game. Dropping back in zone, finding a throwing lane, closing it down. Well, what the Bills seem to want to do with this new defense, Jim Leonard, Jay Valai, they want to play physical. They want to play in your face. That's not Hairston's game. Like I said, Hairston's a speed guy. He wants to sit back and close down windows with his legs, not by getting up at the line of scrimmage and pressing a receiver at the snap. Igbinosun, on the other hand, he's going to fit this defense. And if you want to talk about the number one reason to like the Igbinosun pick, in theory, he does what we think Jim Leonard and Jay Valai corners should do, or what they want corners to do. So, does this mean Max Hairston's starting job is in trouble? I think there's a discussion about that. Now, look, Max Hairston, and I talked to Carl Jones about this on BKL Nightly. Please make sure to check that out on Rochester First here. We got another show coming up tonight at 8:30, but you can go back and find it on YouTube, on Spotify. So Carl Jones and I, during the draft process, I put it to Carl. I said, look, Max is not the ideal makeup for this defense. Should he be concerned? And Carl's like, look, if a guy can run 4.2, teams are going to figure it out. And I think Carl is right. I thought he was right then. I still think he's right now. I think when you have that attribute, that off the charts, over the top, 11 out of 10 in an important NFL trait, teams are going to find a way. So I still think Hairston is the guy who's most likely to be the number 2 corner for the Bills. But, man, it would not stun me if Igbenogson took the job. I don't think we're going to go to camp and get an actual competition for the job. But if Hairston doesn't look comfortable in the defense, if Igbenogson is really making plays, it's not out of the realm that Hairston could be a first-round pick on the bench going into this season. Now, like I said, there's going to be opportunities for both guys to play just by the nature of the league. Guys are going to get hurt. And perhaps there will be some rotation too. It wouldn't stun me if the Bills went that route either. We've seen it a few times in recent history. I know that's obviously Sean McDermott defenses. This is a brand new coordinator. It's not out of the realm to have, Igbenogson for a possession, Hairston for a possession, and see if someone runs out and grabs the job with both hands. I still think this is Hairston's job to lose. Like I said, I don't think this is going to be a straight-up competition when we get to training camp. But Igbenogson can steal this job because I think he's going to be better at what the Bills generally seem to want their corners to do. And the fact that Brandon Beane jammed in a corner in round 2 in a spot where the Bills were seemingly set, at least with 2 starters at corner, to me, that speaks volumes about what the Bills probably think about Max Hairston. I think they still believe in him. I think they believe in the speed. But they are hedging their bets a little bit by adding Igbenogson, which I think in the small vacuum of the corner room probably makes some sense, even if in the bigger picture of what the Bills are trying to build team-wise, you really are kind of scratching your head at adding another corner. And that's another part about why, if you go through what Brandon Beane said about why he takes Igbenogson, the idea that these guys are going to play, the idea that we want to make sure we fix what was wrong last year, those are nice things to tell the media. The real reason, there's a good chance that the real reason is we're not sure Max Hairston can play in this defense. And we frankly didn't see enough last year to think he can play at all. And like I said, drafting Igbenogson puts the Bills in a spot where it's only one of Igbenogson or Hairston who can be the long-term starter, who can have the long-term impact. I think Brandon Beane might be hedging the bet on that a little bit to make sure if we're wrong on this Max Hairston guy, or if he just doesn't fit what this new defense wants to do, I want another option, not to just be the third corner, not to just make sure we don't play Dane Jackson in a playoff game. I want another guy who can be the guy in case the guy we took last year isn't going to work out. And you can cut that both ways because it's smart to take a very important position and make sure you're covered as a starter. But it's also kind of admitting that the guy you used a high leverage draft pick on last year might not be nearly as good as you thought, or that the new defense you're going to is going to make your first round pick from last year something that won't work for your team. And the other part of it too is if Brandon Beane is going to sell you on we need 3 corners, and the Bills probably do, if Igbenogson is going to be the starter because he fits the defense better, what the Bills should probably do then is trade Hairston, because Hairston is still a first-round talent just on another defense in that situation. And you can get a pretty good asset back for Hairston. But after Brandon Beane took us through the whole song and dance about you need 3 corners, we don't want to have a guy with a bullseye on him when we get to the postseason, I don't know if the Bills would go all the way to trading Max Hairston if Igbenogson wins the job. And probably not this year anyway, because even if Igbenogson looks good for 3-4 weeks and you get to the trade deadline at the end of October and you're thinking, wow, this is going to be the guy, I don't know if you're sure enough to where you want to part with an asset like Max Hairston. Again, when you have that level of speed, you want to find something to work out with him. You want to figure out a way to keep that guy in your team. But it is going to be an interesting future to navigate, because while the Bills do have a couple long-term options at corner, we don't know if either one of them are any good, frankly. And there's a good chance that by drafting Igbinosun at pick 62 this year, you've taken either that pick or the Hairston pick and made it a failure. It's really hard to see a world where we get to 2-3 years from now and we look back at both Hairston and Igbinosun and say they were both good picks. You almost are in a spot now where it has to be that one or the other is a bust. And that, I think, is the most unfortunate part of this for the Bills, because like we said, the thing they've seemed to miss the most over the last few years is that elite impact guy not named Josh Allen in the postseason. The best way to land those guys, like we said, is early in a draft. Well, now you've got a first-round pick from 25 and a second-round pick from 26, and you've almost forced yourself into a spot where one of those guys at minimum is not going to fill that bill. And that, I think, is the most frustrating part out of the Igbinosun pick, even if there's logic to making sure you will have somebody who works at that corner spot. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about a little more of the Bills draft, hit the Sabres. Rachel Liebert will be in with, you see this? Weird stuff over the weekend. We got a couple good ones for you today, so please stay tuned here to the Endgame. I'm Thad Brown. The kids who go high in the draft, they call this station Rock One. It's also known as Rochester First. We're back right after a break. Thad Brown back here with you on the Endgame. Let's go through some more of the Bills draft picks here, what they did over the weekend. If you want to check out my Instagram, my Facebook, Thad Brown 7 on Instagram, Thad Brown 7 on TikTok, I kind of gave my full breakdown of the draft. C+ would be my grade for the Bills, which is about what the Bills landed on nationally. They were the 17th of 32 teams in terms of the draft grade compilation that was done today. Reed Brugler is the guy who puts together all the draft grades. Love this chart every year. You can find that on my X feed, Thad Brown 7. Bills were 17th. Dolphins and Patriots were 18 and 19. Jets were 4th in the division. Jets had a lot of high picks. I mean, 3 first-round picks. They should be 4th. But 17th, I think, is about right for the Bills. I'm going to be a touch lower on them than the Nationals. There were 5 out of 24 A grades, and then 6 out of 24 were either C's or D's, everything else in the middle, which about makes sense. So let's talk about a few of the other guys. We'll start with TJ Parker, the first pick for the Bills. He was the number 35 overall pick from Clemson, the edge. Not the edge I would have picked. I was more of a Cassius Howell guy myself, but I get the thinking here. Parker's going to be a better run defender than he is a pure pass rusher. There's pass rush upside there. I mean, he can get to the quarterback, but he's not going to be electric off the edge. One of the things I like about this idea, though, is that because he's a good run defender, I think you can put him in on early downs, and you might be able to save Greg Rousseau and Bradley Chubb a little bit. Now, Rousseau is one of the best run defenders in the NFL. So you still want to have Rousseau playing the edge as much as possible during the year. And Chubb is a good run defender too. He's not great, but he's responsible. He's not going to get you beat. But Chubb is probably the best pass rusher the Bills still have. And if Brandon Beane, he talked about Parker as a 3-down guy, a guy that can play the run and the pass. And that's true. I don't know if he's elite, any of those things. I think he's a better run defender than a pass rusher, but he can play all 3 downs and be very solid in the NFL. If you look at the draft board and you're going to limit yourself to just guys who can play on all 3 downs, because as much as I like Cassius Howell as a pass rusher, he ain't playing the run for a long time, if at all, in the NFL. He might be a designated pass rusher at best. So if you're going to, as the Bills, say, I only want a guy who can play on all 3 downs, then I do think Parker was the best of what's available. Derek Moore and Who's the other guy? Zion Young went a little bit after, about 12 picks after Parker went. I like Parker as a better player. So I do get the idea of taking Parker in that situation. The other thing too is when you go through the list of guys who are 3-down players, are any of them a better pass rusher than Bradley Chubb? I would say almost certainly not. Not right now, at least. Not Zion Young. Not even, our Thomas Mason has some juice, but I think Chubb might be better there. So if you're going to look at that group and say, no matter who I pick, Bradley Chubb is still going to be my best pass rusher, then why not take TJ Parker, a guy who can allow Bradley Chubb to concentrate on being your best pass rusher more often? If you're going to look at your group of guys and say, if it's 3rd and 7 and it's January and I absolutely need to stop up 4 in the fourth quarter, who do I want on the field? Well, it's Bradley Chubb. That means you probably want him on the field a little less on other downs. And with TJ Parker, you can do that. TJ Parker's a guy that you should be able to drop right in to your defensive line on day one and get better against the run. So now you've taken your best pass rusher and put him in a spot where he can concentrate on doing that more often, even if he's still a quality run defender. It's not like last year where the Bills needed to get Joey Bosa off the field on rundowns because he was bad. Bradley Chubb can play the run, but TJ Parker can play the run. So then let Bradley Chubb work more on the pass. This is like what we talked about with Caden McDonald a little bit. Caden McDonald would have been a nice add at defensive tackle, in part because you can take Deion Walker and allow him to focus a little more on getting after the quarterback, a little more of a penetrator, as opposed to having to occupy that nose position. I think you can do some of the same with TJ Parker as a run defender, letting Bradley Chubb be a little more of a pass rushing guy. But also, going back to what we talked about in the first block with the Bills never having that elite guy, if you are always chasing the 3-down guy, if you're always chasing the versatility guy, then it's kind of hard to have that elite player. I do think you're better off in the NFL gambling on elite traits than you are finding a jack of all trades. The Bills have always loved their versatility. Now, maybe it'll be different under Joe Brady, but with Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, versatility was, maybe trait number 2 behind availability. If you can play 4 positions, then we want you on our team. And look, every team in the NFL covets that to a degree. But again, with TJ Parker, the Bills went with a 3-down player who isn't nearly as good a pass rusher right now as Cassius Howell or probably Art Thomas Mason is. Certainly Howell. Now, maybe, look, again, Parker develops into a better pass rusher, and then you're getting a guy who might be a smidgen worse than Howell, but way better against the run. Sure, I get that. But if you're always chasing the versatility, always chasing the 3-down guy, then again, you never find the high-impact player. And Cassius Howell might be a high-impact player. Now, he might also be a guy that washes out of the NFL in 3 years. I think TJ Parker, at worst, probably could do a Shaq Lawson and be in the league as a high-level run defender or a competent run defender for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I think this Bills team, I don't want to say they should, because again, there's ways where TJ Parker can help. But again, it's frustrating to look at the Bills and to say they never have that elite player. And with their first 2 picks, they go with a guy who's a better all-around player than he is a pass rusher, and then a corner who's going to make either himself or the first-round pick from last year a backup. It's not – people get mad at Brandon Beane for not being aggressive, and I don't think that's the case. I think Brandon Beane goes out and does what he wants a lot more than people want to give him credit for. But he doesn't end up, or hasn't at least yet, found enough of those elite game-changing players. And I don't think by going TJ Parker, your 3-down defensive edge, followed by a corner to cover up on the corner you had last year, you're not giving yourself enough chances to find that elite player. Those were the only 2 picks the Bills made on Thursday or Friday. I love what Brandon Beane did on Thursday. Trading down and trading down and trading down. It was perfect. It was a great way to manage a draft that was not very good at the top, but that was deep in the middle. At some point, though, those guys got to become those players, or those picks have to become players. And the players the Bills got before pick 125, you want to throw Jude Bowery in there too, these are not guys that have a high probability of being big-time impact players. And maybe, I've talked about this a couple times, maybe this wasn't the draft for it. This just was not the year to find that high elite guy. This was not the draft that was going to have it, not for anybody, let alone the Bills, who were scheduled to pick at 26. I mean, the Jets at pick 2 took David Bailey, and people are hemming and hawing about, I don't know, man, he can't play the run. And if that's who went at pick 2, then the Bills maybe weren't going to get a high impact player at pick 26. But even if that was the case, it feels like Brandon Beane did not make much of an effort to maximize those chances this year when it comes to TJ Parker and Davison Igbinosun. And even, like I said, Jude Bowery, who does fit a need as the swing tackle. I don't mind. Jude Bowery gets lumped into this because of what the Bills did in round 2. In round 4, if you're grabbing a tackle that can be a long-term, your Ryan Vandermark replacement, totally fine with that. Couple of thoughts here quick. I want to hit on some Sabres, and then Rachel's going to be in a few minutes. Caleb Elam-Orr, I think that's a guy that can really bring some juice to the Bills. I like him off the edge as a rusher. I mean, he gets downhill in a hurry. I don't want him to be the guy who's fighting through a tackle because he's a little on the lighter side for a linebacker. And one of the things that stuck out to me on film is that if there's an offensive lineman who gets on him, it's over, whether it be in the run game or the pass game. If he's blitzing off the edge and a tackle's got him one-on-one, it's over. He does not have pass rush edge style moves. Same thing in the run game. But if Elam-Orr is like the extra rusher or the guy who gets free because a blitz worked, it's over. I mean, that guy is going to come in like a freight train and destroy whoever's got the ball, usually the quarterback. So having that kind of juice off the edge and as a blitzing weapon, I like. He can drop into coverage okay. You don't want him doing it a lot. We'll see if he develops there and becomes a long-term linebacker, but I do like the idea of what he brings juice-wise. Then the Bills got Jalen Kilgore in round 5, a guy who fell really deep down the draft. I liked him as an in-the-box kind of chaos causer, defending the run. He can cover tight ends. He's not going to win against shiftier receivers. People will talk about all the time. He went up against Texas A&M, and Casey Concepcion ate him for lunch. Now, Concepcion did that to a lot of guys last year, but Kilgore was one of them. And to that point, South Carolina, apparently, even though he had kind of played more in the nickel and up closer to the line of scrimmage last year, they were planning, if he had gone back to college, to move him back to safety. And Brandon Beane has said the Bills will start Kilgore out as a safety. So that puts him behind on the depth chart, at least Cole Bishop and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, probably Geno Stone too. So Kilgore as a 5th rounder, I know a lot of people are coming back at me on X today about how he's going to play immediately. He's going to be all over the field. And while the athletic profile says that's possible, the draft position says the league doesn't think that much of him. And while the league isn't always right, the league is right quite a bit. So I like Kilgore. I think that he can be a guy who can be a weapon in the middle of a pass defense. It might take a little more development than it looked like on film based on where the Bills picked him. And then on the fact that what I think he did the best last year is something not only the Bills don't really want him to do at first, but it seemed like South Carolina was a little itchy about him going that route as well. Can't have a show today without talking about the Sabres quick. Boy, they hammered Boston. That was old Sabres. That was the team that can take a 3-1 deficit and turn it into a 5-3 win at the drop of a hat. A team that when you make mistakes against them, as Boston did early, it ends up in your net over and over and over. Yeah, they got a couple breaks on the 3rd and 4th goal, but they were in that zone and dangerous the whole first period. It could have been 8-0. So this team is now, I think at home, it wouldn't be crazy to think that with the fans being so excited, with everybody dialed in for Sabres playoff hockey, that they might have put a little too much on their shoulders to play games 1 and 2, and maybe got a little fortunate in game 2 to be able to come back after playing a not great game at all for the first 50 minutes. Going on the road may have settled them down a little bit because game 3 was good. Game 4 was what we saw from January to April. The team that can just dominate you step on your throat and end a game with 3-4 goals in succession, with goals coming from up and down the lineup too. Tage Thompson didn't even score on Sunday, and the Sabres put 6 in the net. So this Boston series is over. I mean, look, if the Sabres blow this, we're going to have a whole different discussion about this season. So this series is over. The goal now, get it done in Game 5 on Tuesday, because Montreal-Tampa is 2-2. Sabres are going to get the winner of that series. If they get past Boston, you want to have the rest. You want to be the team that has the advantage this time of year, and you now have an opportunity to do that the faster you can take care of Boston in this series. All right, every single week, I bring in someone from the sports staff, and we talk about something over the weekend that really got our attention. We call it, you see this. Rachel Eibert is in today. Her microphone is now active. And I'm going to let you go first, because the one you got from this weekend is something that I don't think it's talked about enough, even though it kind of does get talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, for the first time since 2014, a Heisman finalist did not get drafted.
That I didn't know.
And that being Diego Pavia, who we've talked about on the show when the Heisman was happening. A lot to unpack, because this is a guy that, I mean, like I said, 2014, your Heisman finalists are normally the best in college football, and he didn't get taken. I would like to say that during, I think, day one of the draft, I literally went to Caleb and I was like, Caleb, what if Diego Pavia goes undrafted? He was like, that's not going to happen. I was like, you're right. It's not going to happen. And then it happens. Okay, so from my take of the situation, it's mostly a character issue, because that's the whole reason we talked about him during the Heisman ceremony. Was he didn't win the Heisman, and he went on, I think Instagram it was, and posted, F the voters, and then had that whole thing happen with it. The other thing too is he's pretty undersized. That was another big storyline of the Heisman, and even just the draft process was I think he was listed at 6 foot. I think 5'10" was the official height that he at the combine that they put down for him. But really, I mean, I was shocked that this happened. I thought he'd for sure be a late rounder. I know he's accepted an invitation to the Baltimore's rookie minicamp now, so I mean, it's not completely off the table for him to make a roster. Chances are looking slim, but to me, I mean, this is just textbook. To me, I'm looking at it from the frame of, this is, the NFL is a job, and you have to be held to the standard of, you can get, I know he never made it to the NFL quite yet, but if you say things, you can get fired from your job. And this is a big, just maybe wake up call for him, but I thought he would have had this wake up call back in December when this Heisman, all of this stuff was happening. But I mean, I think it's kind of, it's a big problem in the NFL. We see so many times like guys that do things that are not character, like high character things, obviously, but their skill on the field can back it up enough for the NFL GM or for the head coach to be like, we're going to let this slide. I mean, we've seen it all year with several situations in the past. But this, I think, yes, he was a guy that turned Vanderbilt completely around. It was their first 10-win season. He was definitely worthy of being the runner-up at the Heisman, but he still, to me, was a quarterback that was a college-level quarterback that I don't think was really going to translate in the NFL that well anyway, especially him being a 5'10" quarterback that's kind of just like this gunslinger and just runs all over the place. I mean, whatever. But then you add on top of all these character issues, and this wasn't as big of a shock for me, and I think it's just kind of, you act a certain way, and NFL GMs see it, and this is kind of what happens.
I think almost all of what you say is 100% accurate. Number one, guys who go late in the draft, I think a lot of it is traits. You're betting on, this guy is so fast, but he can't catch a cold. This guy is 6'6", 320, but he doesn't know where to put his hands on a block. When you are the opposite of that, when you're not the traits guy and don't have the obvious skills to go early, I think it's hard to make an argument to pick you. Yeah. More importantly, though, and there's a little bit of Shedeur Sanders with this, but it's not quite the same thing. To be a backup quarterback in the NFL, it sounds dumb. You almost have to be a good hang right now. I mean, that's really like, it's not job one, but if your role is going to be the break glass in case of emergency leader of the team, when you're not doing that, you better be offering something else. And if you're Pavia, who is seemingly a detriment to be around, unless he's the man, then you're the opposite of what a backup quarterback needs to be. And no matter what he thinks he is, and as a Heisman Trophy winner, he was good in college, you're going to be a backup to start no matter what. If you can't fill that good hang role, then it makes it hard for a team to justify wanting to bring you on board, especially since he's not only not a good hang right now, but he's potentially an active problem for your team.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too, looking at the statements that he put on social media when he didn't win the Heisman, the F the voters situation. I mean, and then he had to go on and apologize for Fernando Mendoza being like, you actually do deserve this. I think too, just that putting it in a spotlight of, you're kind of not directly putting down the person who won it, but it's like, this is the best pick of, the number one pick of the draft. Everybody's known this since before even the college football playoffs. This is like, it's just such a team. You have to be a team player, like you said, like if you're that backup quarterback. And I think that's why, GMs kind of maybe let these other situations in the league slide. But if you're not a team player, I think that's maybe the glaring issue. And like I said, his skill, it's there, but it's not NFL level we can kind of overlook this and it would be okay. And you mentioned Shedeur Sanders too. I think, yes, there were obviously a lot of issues with Shedeur Sanders, but Shedeur Sanders was never a put down, like the people situation. It was just like he was kind of like full of himself, and was just his dad.
His dad, I'm saying his issues were dad more than it was him.
Yeah, so that's my take on it. I'm not surprised. I was surprised, but like also, I mean, if you're trying to get a job somewhere and you go on social media and slander the people in that world, then this is what happens. Which
is what he did with the Heisman voters, more or less. I think also too, you say GMs need to have a reason to, if they can overlook something, they'll let you come on board. You need to give them a reason to overlook your issues. And he just does not have one right now. He's not a starting quarterback. He's not very tradesy. He's not good in terms of having the right size. So what is the reason to have you on an NFL roster? There is not one right now. And now he's going to go to Baltimore to kind of prove it.
Yeah, and it goes back to, the last thing I'll say is it goes back to even before the Heisman ceremony. There was controversy with him because he came from a JUCO, then he went to, I think, New Mexico State, and then he went to Vanderbilt. There was controversy with him at New Mexico State during Vanderbilt's season, like just him, hitting the Heisman pose, during, like just acting like he was going to win it basically the whole season. We talked about it too. His mom was doing it. I remember if you remember that. So it isn't even just the Heisman thing. I think it was just a culmination of leading up to this event and then doesn't get drafted.
Like you said, it's a job interview. You make a lot of the wrong decisions. You are not going to get the job.
Exactly.
Okay, the one I want to talk about is from Saturday. This is Nuggets Timberwolves at the end. So Nuggets won the game the Timberwolves won the game by 16. It would have been 14, except that Jaden McDaniels, with 1 second to go, and everybody else on the floor in the backcourt decided to score a basket at the end, an irrelevant basket. After he scored it, Nikola Jokic ran down, pushing and shoving. There was, I don't want to say punches were thrown, but it was a fight as much as an NBA, not any NBA fight, not involving Isaiah Stewart. That's about as rough as it gets. And now that no one's been suspended for this, there were fines, whatever. But the controversy was, should Jaden McDaniels be making a basket up 14 with 1 second to go? Now, not every basket is made equal. And if you watch the highlight of this, what McDaniels does is like he's in the front court. Mike Conley's got the ball in the back court. He kind of just throws it up. And McDaniels kind of like strolls to the basket. It's very soft. It's very slow. And he just lays it in gingerly, right? This is not like he went up there and like threw it down both hands, exclamation, scream. He just went in there and made a basket. So to me, getting upset over that, I thought was a little ridiculous by the Nuggets. Now, you can understand it. They're down 3-1 in the series now. Jokic, by the way, was 1 for 10 shooting in the second half. I bet he was probably unhappy about that. Right. So I want to give you 3 perspectives that I found today, and this is interesting. I'll let you react. Okay. Number one, so like I said, Mike Conley was the one that passed the ball because there was a shot by the Nuggets, didn't matter. Conley gets the rebound and probably not aware exactly how much time was left, sees McDaniels up court, just gets the ball up to him. And he said later, he goes, the moment I saw it was Jaden, I just put my head down because I knew what he was going to do. He goes, I thought for a minute maybe he wouldn't, and then no, he did. So he goes, it's my fault. That's on me. I'm sorry. Because Jaden McDaniels is a little, it takes a particular guy to want to score there. McDaniels is one of those guys. That's number one. Number two, inside the NBA, Shaquille O'Neal said he would have thrown it down. He would have done the two-handed slamma-jamma, trying to break the backboard kind of thing, and wouldn't have cared. And he goes, look, it's the playoffs. I'm trying to get in your head. I want to get in your wife's head. I want to embarrass you. So we're going to do that. That's what. Not my words, Shaq words. Charles Barkley said if someone had done that to him, then he's putting a hit on that guy next game. So he's like, we're not doing that because I know that if it was done to me, I'd be mad. So a very interesting group of perspectives Where do you want to land there?
I think honestly, what he did might even be worse than him slamming it down, just because he did it so nonchalantly that it's just kind of like.
Have you seen it?
I did see the clip of it, yeah, but I haven't like looked into all these reactions or anything. But I think maybe that might be worse, just to be like, yep, we're just gonna throw this in, and like, I don't know, it just like rubs you maybe the wrong way. I mean, I don't know, I'm not on the court, I'm not getting slammed in the final 2 seconds of the game. But I do agree, though. I mean, if you're doing this, the other team is 100% gonna have something. They weren't gonna want to get after you the next game. So I don't know if that's. I don't know. I think I agree with honestly all of these perspectives. I think, I don't know. But I don't disagree with him. Like, I don't think you shouldn't put in a final second basket because, like you said, it's the NBA Finals and you're trying to get in the other team's head. And if you just won, I mean, you're open lane, go for it. I mean, I don't think it warranted this huge fight.
I have no problem with it.
Yeah.
I think it was dumb that the Nuggets reacted the way they did, or I think it was just Jokic. I think the rest of his teammates came to support him. I do understand it. Obviously, you can get where the frustration is. I will say something you brought up though about like, there's a chance that the Nuggets might want to get him next game.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? In other words, what are you gaining with the 2 points?
Yeah, probably not.
That is going to potentially earn you elbows and shoulders and all kinds of stuff the next game. Now, that maybe from Shaquille O'Neal's point of view, you're getting into a team's head and taking them out of what they want to do. There's some benefit there.
Sure.
End of the day, the Nuggets, this is classic loser mentality.
Yeah.
You lost the game.
That's how I feel.
Don't get mad. Don't get mad. Like
it just feels like you lost, you're mad. And
as I said, it would have been different if he had like thrown down a dunk and then like turned around and pointed and was like, ah!
Yeah, that's true.
But he just walked in, made a basket, and was like
I said, though, I feel like that might just rub me the wrong way. He's just like so nonchalant.
Do you think it's worse that way?
I think if it were me, I'd be like, dang, like he just walked right up there, laid it in, and then walked off the court.
And didn't care?
Like, yeah, I think that would make me like, dang.
Either way, not worth it, but interesting to go through all the perspectives for sure. All right, that's all for today. We're back again on Thursday. Remember, check out BKO Nightly tonight. We're going to break down all the Bills draft picks, myself, Rachel, and Caleb Carr. Thanks for watching today, and we'll see you again on Thursday.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.